Hey, beautiful women of purpose. Now, we've been talking about formation before fruit, with the understanding that who we're becoming matters just as much as what we produce. Today, we're building on that foundation because after formation, there's a question that many women quietly tend to wrestle with. We ask, how do I walk in step with God in this season without rushing ahead of Him, without misreading the moment, or even forcing movement? And that question brings us into our focus for February, which is alignment. Hi, my name is Teresa V. Smithen-Quintana, and welcome to my channel, a space created to equip, empower, and encourage Christian women who know that God has placed a vision inside of them, but desire wisdom, knowledge, and understanding to carry it through. If you're new here, I'm really glad that you're here. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss what we're building together, okay? And if you want daily devotionals, Bible studies, and or, daily challenges, you can join me in the Purpose and Calling app that is available in the Apple and Google Play Store. Now, for deeper conversation and community with women who are just like you, women walking out their vision, you're invited to join me in the Lilies Among Thorns Society on the school platform. All right, let's go right in. When we talk about alignment, it's important to understand that this isn't a new idea or a trend. It's actually a biblical principle that's rooted in agreement, in order, and in divine timing. Scripture says in Amos 3, can two walk together unless they are agreed? Alignment is an agreement, not emotional certainty. It's not momentum. It's not visible outcome. It is an agreement physically, emotionally, financially, spiritually with God. And being spiritually active doesn't always mean that you're aligned with what God is emphasizing now. Alignment begins with agreement, not activity. And agreement means that your movement, your focus, and your decisions are in step with what God is emphasizing now, not what he emphasized before and not what you hope that he will emphasize next. See, scripture consistently shows us that God works through order. Order precedes fruit, order precedes movement, order precedes multiplication. And this is why alignment cannot be measured by how busy you are, how passionate you may feel, or even how many doors seem open. Those things can exist without you being in agreement with God. Biblically, agreement is not emotional confirmation. It is positional alignment. It's choosing to walk where God is walking, not simply believing that he exists. And so, for the woman that's listening today, this matters because spiritual activity can feel productive while still being misdirected. Alignment asks a deeper question than, am I doing something for God? It asks, am I walking with God in what he is doing right now? And that distinction really sets the foundation for everything else. One of the greatest challenges for women of purpose is discerning what season that we are in. Scripture tells us that there is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. And a season is not just a period of waiting or movement. Biblically, a season is a divine appointed window or time where God emphasizes a specific purpose. Think of it as a phase of life, a temporary period defined by specific purpose or trial. See, seasons determine what you give your attention to, what you invest your energy in, what you carry, and what you don't. Listen, no season remain forever. And this is why alignment depends on timing. A thing can be God ordained in one season, but inappropriate in another, not because it was wrong, but because the season for it changed. So, in other words, you can be aligned in intention, but misaligned in timing. Alignment is you being in agreement with what God is emphasizing now, not just with, the whole vision as a whole. God's will unfolds in stages, not all at once. And scripture consistently shows us that God gives us vision before visibility, promise before possession, and calling before commissioning. Alignment requires discerning which stage you're in. And we see this clearly in the life of David. Excuse me. David was anointed king, and that calling was God ordained. But David being put into that position of king too early would have been misaligned. It would have been detrimental. See, David honored Saul, served faithfully, and he waited, not because the calling wasn't real, but because the season hadn't shifted yet. See, timing protected David's purpose, and timing will protect yours. So let's make this practical. See, starting the business, the vision may be from God, but this season may be about preparation, structure, or capacity, not about launching. Pushing forward too early can create a strain in your life instead of fruit. And stepping into leadership, right? The calling may be clear, but the season may require you sitting under leadership, learning or growing in character before taking the lead. And if you have to speak publicly or teaching, the message may be valid, but God may be developing depth and discernment or even humility before expanding your influence. Pursuing relationships or partnerships, the desire may be good, but timing matters. Alignment includes waiting until foundations are solid. So in each case, the issue isn't the vision, it's the season. When we act outside of timing, God ordained things can feel heavy. And in Ecclesiastes 3 and 1, once again it says, to everything there is a season. See, alignment depends on honoring when, not just what. That's why timing isn't a delay tactic, it's a protection. Scripture tells us that God promised Abraham a son, not just a child, but a future, a lineage, a covenant. The promise was clear, the calling was real, and the destination was certain, but the process was not fully explained. And this is where alignment and timing comes into focus. Genesis 16 tells us that years passed after God's promise and Sarah had not conceived as of yet. So time created tension. The waiting, the wondering created tension in their lives. So what did Sarah do? Well, she suggested a solution, Hagar. And it wasn't disbelief in the promise, it was human reasoning stepping in to manage divine timing. See, misaligned timing doesn't mean you stop trusting God. Many times it means that we ran out of patience with him. We're tired of waiting and then we decide to start helping God out. Like he asked for it. He did it. Helping God often looks something like us speeding up what feels slow, creating alternatives when the waiting feels uncomfortable, moving ahead without any updated instructions from God. Abraham and Sarah didn't reject God's promise. They attempted to control the timing of it. And that's what misaligned timing looks like. And this matters spiritually because you trying to help God out can result in decisions like Ishmael. Ishmael was not a mistake in existence, but he was the product of misaligned timing and order. Later, Isaac came, the son of promise, when God's timing was complete. And this teaches us something very critical here. God can still fulfill his promise even after misaligned timing, but misalignment often introduces unnecessary consequences and delays. Destination answers what God will do. Timing answers when. Order answers how it unfolds. God's promises are fulfilled with a divine sequence. When timing and order are honored, peace is present, provision is clear, and movement feels sustained. When timing and order are bypassed, then we have tension, we have increased confusion. You know, the promise starts to feel heavy. See, God didn't just promise Abraham a son, He established the when and the how that the promise would unfold. The when was Abraham at 100 years old. The how was Sarah, a barren woman. See, it was a multi-layered promise. It was a multi-layered uh, uh, pr- promise. God had to be glorified. Okay, alignment means that you have to trust God with the outcome. For the woman listening today, misaligned timing can look like you launching before preparation is complete. You know, you forcing momentum because waiting feels uncomfortable, substituting clarity with activity, or even moving without peace because pressure feels louder than patience. The promise doesn't disappear, honey, but the process becomes strained. And Abraham teaches us this, that you can believe God, you can love God, and you can still move out of alignment by acting before timing and order are established. That's why alignment depends on timing, not because God is slow, okay? But because timing protects the promise and the person that is carrying it. So now let's talk about why misalignment is often a matter of assumption, but not disobedience. Many women assume that alignment means that if God gave me the vision, that I should act immediately. I used to be like that. If nothing is happening, I must be missing something. If someone else is moving, then I should be too, right? No. Scripture teaches us a different pattern. Jesus said that the Son can do nothing by himself. He can only do what he sees his Father doing. And that's in John 5. See, Jesus waited, he discerned, and he moved and stepped with the Father's activity, not human urgency. Alignment requires seeing what God is doing, not projecting what he thinks he should do. Assumption, on the other hand, skips discernment. It fills in gaps that God has not yet spoken into. Assumption often sounds logical, spiritual, or even responsible, but it still bypasses inquiry. Jesus never moved based on opportunity, need, or pressure. He moved by paying attention to what the Father was actively doing in that season. For example, when many were sick at the pool of Bethesda, he healed one man and then he moved on. He was responding to direction, not demand, in alignment with the Father's will. Now, for the woman that's here today, that's listening, okay, assumption creates pressure while discernment creates peace. Remember that. Misalignment here often happens quietly when movement replaces discernment. Now, let's discuss why alignment precedes action. Before God releases movement, he establishes agreement. And we see this once again with Moses. Okay, Moses was called long before he led the Israelites, and he was also sent after his alignment was established. With David, David was anointed long before he ruled, and then he was positioned after timing matured. These were not idle seasons. These were seasons of alignment. Okay. Alignment determines what you respond to, what you ignore, what you wait on, what you release. I've said that before, right? But it's important for us to understand that, right? Okay, because it can produce strain instead of fruit if you're misaligned. Action without alignment requires you to carry the weight of the outcome. Alignment places the weight on God. And when alignment is present, that action will feel sustained, effort will feel measured, and progress will feel like everything is anchored. But when alignment is missing, then effort increases, right? Your peace decreases and your clarity, well, it becomes unstable. And that, my sister, is strain. Strain shows up when you're trying to make a vision work instead of stewarding it. Jesus said fruit comes from connection, not exertion. When action comes before alignment, effort replaces grace. So the question is, how do we discern alignment practically? Well, alignment requires attention, not effort. So practical discernment, right? Here are some questions. What is God consistently emphasizing in prayer? What feels unnecessary of force right now in my life? What instruction has clarity even if the direction does not? Or what produces peace or pressure when you're doing it? Colossians 3:15 says, "Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts." You've got to have peace. See, peace is often confirmation of alignment, okay? Not certainty. Effort focuses on doing. Attention focuses on listening. Effort asks, "What should I do next?" Attention asks, "What is God highlighting?" Stillness is not inactivity, it is inattentiveness. Alignment sharpens when you pay attention to where peace governs and where pressure persists. Trying harder doesn't clarify alignment. Listening longer often does. Alignment is not about you striving to get ahead of God. It's about you learning how to walk with Him wisely. And so, as I close, next week we'll talk about what happens internally when your alignment is off. Not in condemnation or even in understanding, but in how to recognize the signals before they turn into a necessary strain. But for now, I want you to reflect and ask yourself, am I discerning God's timing or assuming His direction? I want you to sit with that. Sit with it honestly this week. Seek God's face. Lean into discernment because why? The answers are there. I want to say thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode. Take care.